So, we have just 2 more chapters to do. Today's chapter is number 17, and it looks at another area of motor behavior. So at the beginning of the semester, I think I told you that motor behavior has 3 components to it: motor development, motor learning, and motor control. So we've spent the majority of the semester looking at motor development issues. We also did some biomechanics stuff that's very relevant to those principles. So today we're going to look at a few motor learning concepts. So we're switching fields somewhat. And the lecture is going to bring in some additional information on top of the information in the chapter, because motor learning is a vast area. I want to give you a taste of as much of the kind of foundation of motor learning as I can. So I'm going to, there's I think 1 or 2 things that I'm going to discuss that are in the chapter, but I'm also going to add some new things. All right, and you'll need some of the handouts from your lab packet. Let me find the lab packet, and we'll need the Gentiles taxonomy chart, the Gentiles article, and the open-closed skill assessment article. So those are all relevant for today's lecture. Okay. So let's make a start. We're going to start with this one. So this first part of the lecture is going to look at what motor learning is, what we're studying when we switch to a motor learning perspective. We're also going to look at some classifications of skills, because some of what motor learning does is looks at practice principles, right? So how do I set up a practice, a drill, or a training session for a particular skill? Then we first have to classify what kind of skill it is, because the motor learning research looking at how the brain picks up new skills indicates that it depends on the type of skill and the context of the skill. All right, so we're going to be looking at some classification ideas, and then we'll have a brief discussion on the concept of motor abilities, so things I'm born with that can impact my ability to learn particular types of skills. Okay. So motor learning researchers then are interested in understanding what types of skills people can learn, how rapidly they can learn them, and then really key is how well we retain what we learn, right? Because if I'm teaching movement skills, I don't want to teach them in one module or in one summer camp or however we're learning those, and then find that I have to teach them all over again because the people that were in the module or on the camp don't remember how to do them, right? Or still can't do them as well as they could when we were learning them. All right, so retention is a key idea. So just to make sure we've got our terminology correct for this, as we've found quite a lot with the motor development, sometimes terms are used differently in everyday language to how we use them in the research world. So skill is the actual task that we're asking someone to perform, right? So it could be, you could also call it action, right? So what's the task? Skilled means that the quality of the performance, the competence of the skill is proficient, right? So how skilled am I at this task, right? So, our first classification approach is pretty old, and it's one that I learned when I was an undergrad, so it has been around for a long time. It's one-dimensional, so we look at the classification on a single continuum. And what we're doing when we use this version is identifying parts of the skill that we can say are similar within a group of skills, right? What's a variable of these skills that holds true for all that group, okay? And it's pretty easy because we just have basically two categories at the end of the continuum, and then we can place the skill somewhere along the continuum if it doesn't fit on either end distinctly. We have three options of classifications under this one-dimensional approach. The first one is to do with the size of the primary musculature that is creating the skill. So am I using big muscle groups to do the skill or little muscle groups to do the skill? The second one is with regards to how does the skill start and finish, right? Is it distinct or does it kind of go on? Is it repetitive in order to achieve the goal of the skill? And the third one is about the context that the skill is occurring in. So the environment plays a role. Is the environment kind of crazy and there's people running around and things happening? Or is the environment very quiet and controlled and I'm on my own, I'm isolated? So let's look at them in a bit more detail. The first one, the size of the primary musculature that's creating the movement pattern, okay? So at one end of our continuum we have gross motor skills, which are the types of skills we've been working with during the semester, and they use large muscle groups. And at the other end we have fine motor skills, and they're using small muscle groups. So gross motor skills would involve walking, hopping, jumping. Right? Fine motor skills would involve things like buttoning your shirt, typing on your keyboard, doing your texting stuff. Oh, that wasn't meant to come up yet, right? And then we've got skills that would lie somewhere on the continuum between either end because they involve both types of muscle groups, right? So pitching a baseball might be considered a gross motor skill, right? Certainly fundamental throwing would be a gross motor skill, but the subtlety of pitching a baseball involves your fingers and your wrists adding spin to the ball, right? So then we've got this, to be very, very good at pitching, we have to use large and small muscle groups, right? So it's going to lie on the continuum somewhere. And often sports skills end up being in that continuum rather than distinctly at one end or the other end. Then group number two, category number two, is to do with where does the action begin and where does it finish. Okay, so at one end we have discrete motor skills. So discrete motor skills have a very defined beginning and end point to them, right? Oftentimes it's a simple motor pattern. It's not something that's highly complicated, not always, but often. Okay? So, and I just do the one skill, right? And it's finished. At the other end of the continuum, we have continuous motor skills. Continuous motor skills have arbitrary starting and finishing points. They involve repetitive motor pattern activity, right? So to achieve the goal, I have to keep repeating the same motor pattern over and over again. So walking, for example, is a continuous motor skill, okay? I can take one step, but it doesn't achieve anything, right? The goal of walking is to get from point A to point B. So to achieve the goal, I have to keep repeating the motor pattern. Okay, same with cycling, same with swimming, all right? Steering a car, to look at a non-sport motor skill. Steering a car is considered a continuous motor skill because I don't start and stop, hopefully, right? A discrete motor skill would be like throwing, right? Because once I've released the ball, the pattern is finished. If I'm going to do another throw, I have to start the pattern again, right? Catching would be a discrete motor skill. Once I've caught the ball, the motor pattern is finished. Discrete motor skills that are not sport related, things like hitting a piano key. So playing one note would be a discrete motor skill. Now in this classification, they actually have a name for some of the skills that lie on the continuum. And they're called serial motor skills. So serial motor skills are where we link together a continuous sequence of discrete motor skills. All right? So a non-sport option here would be playing the piano. So playing one note is a discrete motor skill. But if I want to play a piece of music, I have to link together lots of discrete skills. So playing a piece of music would count as a serial motor skill. Right? In gymnastics, The tumble run from corner to corner in a floor routine is a serial motor skill because I can do the round off on its own. I can do the back handspring on its own. I can do the back somersault on its own. Or I can link them all together into a tumble run. Okay. And then number 3 is the one that's to do with the context. Where is the skill, where is the motor skill occurring? Right? So, it can be, on one end, an open motor skill. So an open motor skill means that the environment is not stable, it's unpredictable, there is going to be motion in the environment, so that motion could be an object or it could be other people. The environment tends to dictate when you can perform the skill, right? The context dictates that. The other end, very different. The other end we have closed motor skills, and here we have a very stable environment. It's very predictable, right? The performer typically is going to decide when to do the skill and when to finish the skill. Right? So open motor skills, things not sport related like driving a car or walking in a crowd would be open, right? Catching is an open motor skill because in order to catch there has to be a moving ball, otherwise it's not catching. Right? If something is moving, then the skill is defined as open. All right? Closed motor skills, remember, are very stable, very predictable. So we hope picking up a cup of coffee is a closed motor skill, because otherwise it's going to be a bit of a mess. Right? If I'm picking up a cup of coffee, it's like, you know, when you're on a plane and all of a sudden you hit turbulence, that's trying to pick up a cup of coffee in an open environment, right? And there's coffee and food on your plate rolling around, and right, not very pleasant. Okay, so we like to do our picking up a cup of coffee in a closed environment, right? Shooting a free throw is a closed skill because I'm the only athlete in my immediate environment. No one's allowed to interfere with me. The basket doesn't move. I've got the ball, so I'm in charge of when I do the skill. Right? So the difference between catching and throwing a free throw, I think, is a good comparison for you to understand those two ends of the continuum. Oops. So, any questions on the one-dimensional classification?
No.
No?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, as I said, the one-dimensional classification system has been around for a long time. And when you stop and start thinking about it, you're going to come up with many, many movement skills that you're going to be responsible for teaching in different situations that don't fit cleanly on one end or other of those continuums. All right? And so, in about 2000, yeah, I think that's when she published this paper. A researcher called Gentile decided that this one-dimensional approach was too narrow. Right? There were too many movement skills that wouldn't cleanly be diagnosed as one or the other. Right? And so she decided to create a two-dimensional classification system that utilized elements of the one-dimensional classification, but then expanded them. All right? So up on Blackboard is this nice matrix, which, a bit like the MSU chart, looks a little overwhelming when you first look at it. Okay, but actually, it's quite easy to use. I'll give you the trick. Okay, so the first thing Gentile did was to divide skills. She wanted to look at two overarching, like the two main points. One was to do with the context, with the environment. The other one's to do with the action and what it's trying to achieve. So then she took her main divisions and started narrowing them down, making them more detailed. So her environmental context is divided into two. The first one is regulatory conditions. So this is like what's happening in the environment, right? So this is very much like our open-closed single continuum. Okay. So she called her options here stationary, which are closed skills, right? And in motion, which would be open skills. So the environment is stationary or the environment is in motion. Okay? So these characteristics of the environment play an impact. Remember our constraints triangle, right? Our environmental context, what's happening here, interacts with the other constraints to create the emerging movement pattern. Okay. So her second environmental context, which we don't have an option for under the single classification system, was intertrial variability, because she felt that just looking at whether the environment was stationary or in motion wasn't enough. There's more to it than that. So intertrial variability means, do the environmental characteristics stay the same every time I do the skill, or are they different between trials? So she called this absent. So that means that the environment is fixed, it's the same, there's no variability. Or present, the environment is changing and therefore there is variability. Okay. So examples here could be, if we go back to our free throw, right? Our free throw would be stationary under the regulatory conditions, and it would have absent, no intertrial variability, because the ball is the same, the distance from the hoop is the same height, right? So the only variability might be the background, depending on whether you've got an audience behind the net or not, right? So that would be a stationary skill with no variability, absent variability. Now, a golf round, right, would be stationary because you're at the tee or you're on the green, people can't interfere with you, you've got space around you, right? You're in control of the shot. However, it's likely that intertrial variability is present because if I'm playing a golf round on a course, every tee, every hole is different, right? So every shot I play is going to be in a different environment. Does that make sense? And then if we look at in motion, okay, so a forehand from a tennis ball machine, right? So assuming I have the machine set to just one level, right? And you can play around with the dials on those tennis ball machines and create all kinds of chaos on the court. But let's assume that I have the tennis ball machine set on just one level, right? So the ball is going to come out at the same speed in the same place every time, okay? Again, it's open, it's in motion because the ball is moving, even if I'm standing still. Right? If I'm going to hit a ball, the ball has to be moving through the air to come to me. Okay? But in that situation with the machine, variability is absent, we hope, if the machine is working properly. Right? Okay? Now, if I take the same skill and I put it in a tennis game, it's still in motion because the ball is coming from the person I'm playing, but now every time I hit a forehand, it's going to be different because there's intertrial variability, right? The person might slice, they might topspin, they might flat hit, they could go cross court, they could go down the line, they could loop me, right? So there's many options for different types of forehands there. So her second characteristic that she was keen on looking at was the action itself and what the goal for that action was. And so her first piece that she looked at was the person themselves, right? Is the person stable, so are they pretty stationary, or are they moving? All right? And then the object manipulation. So, is there an object involved? Is there not an object involved? So that gives us 16 when we combine these groups, these characteristics, gives us 16 options for classifying a skill now, instead of the previous 6 with some fuzzy bits in the middle, right? So this really expands the opportunity to classify the skill that you're trying to teach. Is it an easy skill or a difficult skill? And you can work that out using this matrix. Okay? So as I said, the matrix looks a little bit overwhelming at first. How do I decide which box the skill goes in? But actually it's quite easy to use. So here's the trick. Okay? You're going to ignore what's going on in the left-hand column and pay attention to the top of the matrix first of all. And the top of the matrix is looking at the action function, all right? And with a series of yes/no questions, you can very easily tie down which box your skill fits in, all right? So the first yes/no question, if you go down to the first row of the table, is the body stable or is the body in transport? Right? That's easy. I'm watching the skill. Is the person moving or is the person standing still? Moving in from point A to point B, transport. Right? Yes or no? So that's quite easy. Once you've answered that question, you automatically halve the table, right? Then we have the next yes/no question. So if we go down to the second row of the table, the next yes/no question is also very easy to do, right? Is there an object involved or is there not an object involved? I'm watching the skill. It's a yes/no question, very easy, okay? When I answer the second yes/no question, now I'm down to one column on that table, right? So we've significantly decreased our choices now, okay? Now comes the bit that's a little bit trickier when we start to look at the environment, okay? So the column on the left is the questions you have to ask about the environment, okay? So, the first question, is the environment stationary or is the environment in motion? All right? With practice, that question becomes a bit easier. Okay? When I answer that yes/no question, then I'm down to 2 boxes. All right? And then my last question, is there inter-trial variability or is there no inter-trial variability within the environment? Yes, no. And that one gives me 1 box, and that's where my skill goes. Okay? Now, if you look closely at the table and you think about these questions, you'll notice that up here, right, box number 1 has the body, the person is stable, they're stationary. There's no object to manipulate. The environment is stable, stationary, and there's no variability in the environment from trial to trial. That is the simplest setup you can do for teaching a motor skill. Right? That's as easy as it gets. Okay? I stand the child in front of the ball is sitting on the floor, not moving, the child is not, well, that involves an object, so that does complicate it, but let's use the ball. The ball's there, the child's stationary, there's no one around them, and they've just got to kick the ball. And then we're going to put the ball back in the exact same place, and they've got to kick the ball. Right? As we work through the table, it gets more complicated. Right? And we get down to the bottom right-hand corner, and things are very complicated in that box. Right? So not only can I use it to classify what kind of skill I've got, I can use this as a tool to help me set up lesson plans so that I'm doing developmentally appropriate progressions for the person I'm teaching the skill to. Right? Not all skills are going to start up in the top left-hand corner, like the kicking skill. Right? So you have to find the starting point and then work down and to the right to develop your lesson plans. Okay? One of the other things I have up on Blackboard for you is an article from a PE journal from JOPED that talks, actually there's two, there's one on skill assessment, so that teaches you how to use some of these classification tools for assessment. And then there's another article that teaches you how to use the table to create developmentally appropriate progressions for your motor skills. Okay. Questions? Okay, and then... No? Okay, thank you. So the last little bit in this first part of the lecture is talking about motor ability. And motor ability is an interesting concept. We come across it a lot when we go into the exercise physiology class, because then we're looking at what a person can do with their body, how their body can adapt to certain types of physical activity and exercise, all right? But the underlying principle is, what abilities do I have that I can build on, okay? We have a bad habit of telling children they can do anything they want if they try hard enough. That's not true when we come to motor skills, all right? So it might be true in other domains in their life, but when it comes to movement, telling them they can do anything they want is giving them false hope, right? So I cannot run 100 meters in 9 seconds. It wouldn't matter how hard I trained. It doesn't matter. It's never going to happen because I don't have that body, right? So we have to be, I think, this is a good teaching point, that we have to be very, very careful with the language we use when we are movement teachers, all right? So the abilities that we have are genetically dictated from mum and dad, and they underlie our capability for motor skill learning and performance, all right? So the ability is, the general term ability is a capacity, a trait that's determines a person's achievement potential for a specific skill. So with regards to movement then, it's an ability that is specifically foundational to the performance of a particular type of movement, right? Is it a power skill? Is it an endurance skill, for example? Oops. So we can use this concept as a way to understand individual differences between students, between clients, between athletes, right? And as I said, the ability underpins the potential that a person has for proficiency or success at a particular type of skill, right? Historically, not these days, long time ago, there was quite a lot of argument over whether someone whether there was such a thing as general motor ability. So, oh, that person is just good at sport, right? Versus the idea of specificity of motor abilities. Well, that person's good at this type of sport, right? And there used to be a lot of argument about the idea of an all-around athlete, right? It's very rare to find someone who is exceptional at more than one thing, right? So in the Olympics, we have events for men and women where they have to do many different track and field events, and they're all added together and someone wins, right? And they're called an all-around athlete because they're pretty good at many different types of events in track and field, okay? But if you look at their time, so I think in both the men's and the women's events, they have to do a 100-meter sprint. If you look at the gold medal for heptathlon, right, and you look at that 100-meter sprint time, that person is not making the final of the 100 meters, right? Same with the high jump, right? They have to do a high jump. Very technical event, very difficult, and they may be quite good at it. They're not making the final of the high jump, right? So this all-around athlete idea means you have someone who has a set of abilities that allows them to be pretty good at lots of things, but not excellent at any one thing. Okay? And so we have to understand that concept there. Right? If someone is a gold medal winner in the 100 meters, they're going to be very slow at running a marathon. That's just how it goes, right? Because they don't have the body to do, you can't do both. We're not given both, right? Most of us get a little bit from each, and we're kind of ish okay. Like, I can run 100 meters slowly. I can run a marathon slowly, right? I can't be great at either of them, okay? If I'm really great at something, I'm really bad at something else. So there was a researcher that got very into this, and his work finished in the 1980s, and unfortunately, I think, no one's ever really picked it up and finished it off, which I think is a bit of a shame, but he identified many motor abilities, and he divided them into these two categories. They're either perceptual or they're physical, right? But as I said, he never really finished this work. You can see that he did his research over a period of 30 years, so he had a very long research life. But he never finished, he didn't really finish looking at balance, he didn't finish looking at visual acuity or eye-hand-foot coordination type ideas. So we don't have a complete list of what we believe are motor abilities. Okay? And here you have to be very careful to be distinctive between skill and being skilled and ability, right? A skill is something I can learn, and ability is something I am born with. Okay? And the ability is going to dictate how well I can do the skill. So you can see this list here: perceptual motor abilities, things like arm hand steadiness. So the girls in the class will know what that's like when they're trying to put their mascara on, right? Are you the person that can walk around the house with your cup of coffee putting your mascara on at the same time? Or are you like me, you have to have your elbow on something and you have to hold your hand or your wrist to keep it really still and not poke yourself in the eye with the mascara on, right? Hand steadiness would play a role in shooting sports, right? Hand steadiness would play a huge role in a Black Hawk helicopter pilot or a brain surgeon, right? Physical proficiency abilities are the ones we tend to butt up against in exercise phys. So things like strength, different types of strength, flexibility, coordination, equilibrium, stamina, my endurance capability, right? My cardio capability. So what's important to think about here is that everybody is born with the whole set of abilities. It's not that I don't get some ability. It's that some people get very little of some of the abilities and some people get a lot of some of the abilities, right? And if I'm an expert at something, I got a lot of ability in several different components, right? If everybody has them, then we can measure them, right? And if we can measure them, then we can use them for two things. One, to evaluate how well this person is doing in learning the skill. And another way we can use them is as a predictor for this person's potential for the performance of this skill. And we do that a lot in sport and in the military and in the medical world, right? To train a brain surgeon or to train a military pilot costs thousands and thousands of dollars, right? I am not just going to train anybody because they say they want to do it. First, I am going to check to see whether they have the ability to be good at that particular performance. If they don't have the abilities necessary to be successful, I ain't spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars training them, right? We do it in sport, right? We run tests all the time. It's what's the football thing called where all the players go and... Combine, right? It's what a combine is, right? They're checking to see what abilities you have. Do you have the set of abilities they want for the player they need in the position that they need that player? Right? If not, you don't get picked. Okay? So if we can identify these motor abilities, if we can measure them and quantify them, then that can help me as the teacher. If I'm watching someone who's really struggling with a particular skill, and I'm not sure why they're having so much trouble, if I can identify the correct motor ability that they're either lacking in, not that they don't have any of it, but they don't have much of it, or that they haven't reached their potential in that I could help them with, then that can explain some of the problems that they're facing. Okay? If it's something that they haven't reached their potential in, how do I help them train that particular ability so that then they can be more successful at the skill? Okay. So we have to be very specific when we do this, all right? And remember that we are teaching to potential, not teaching to change the ability. So for example, let's say someone is struggling with their tennis serve. So if I'm the teacher and I'm trying to teach a tennis serve, what do I think this person needs to be able to perform the tennis serve? So I'm going to break it down into things that have to happen for this tennis serve to be successful. And then, once I've got this idea, then I can say, okay, well, which abilities are involved here, right? So, to be good at a tennis serve, I have to be able to grip the racket very tightly so that as I make contact with the ball, the racket doesn't move in my hand, right? So grip strength is important. That's static strength. Static strength is an ability, right? Does this person not have a lot of static strength? In which case, tennis may not be their game. Or have they not developed their static strength to its full potential? In which case we can do some exercises. Okay. So you can use this idea to help you set up your lesson plans or specific little training stations or games, or send a child home with a squeezy ball so they can work on their grip strength, right? Something like that. Questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I've been talking a lot, so we may not get through all of the second bit. I might have to finish some of this off on Tuesday. Okay, and I have not checked to see whether this is the definition of motor learning that is in the chapter, so you can let me know. But it will be similar if it isn't the same one. Motor learning is the internal processes that occur in relation to practice, right? So remember that practice equals experience. And if it's learning that's occurring, then the change that we see over practice and with experience is going to be relatively permanent, right? If it's not permanent, it's not learning, okay? So motor learning, so let's say, let's take our basketball shot, right? If I am beginning puberty and I haven't had my growth spurt yet and I'm failing at making the basket most of the time, and then I go through my growth spurt and I'm 2 foot closer to the basket and now I make the basket almost always, that is not motor learning, right? That's growth. It's a whole different ballgame. If you go back to our triangle, we can explain that as a structural constraint that interacted to change the motor pattern, right? So it's not a functional constraint, it's not a structural constraint, it's not a training variable, right? It's not a temporary state due to drug use or anything like that. Okay, motor learning is a permanent, or at least relatively permanent, change in skill proficiency based on practice. All right? So if that's the definition that we take, then we've got a bit of a dilemma as the teacher, because I can't see what's going on inside the brain in response to the practice that I've given this person, right? That means that I can only, I don't like the word guess, I prefer the word infer that learning is occurring, right? And I can do that by watching the performance and making certain decisions about the performance. Because the performance I can see, right? I can grade it, I can judge it, I can assess it, score it. That I can see. But I can't see learning, right? So, luckily for us as the teachers, there are some options that we can use that will help us make the decision whether what we're seeing is improved performance that's going to be variable or improved performance that indicates learning because it's going to be relatively permanent, right? I'm going to get that same performance over and over. The first way is just to plot performance over time on a graph, right? And that will give you an answer over time. But it's a lot of bother and it takes a long time to put that together. So there are a couple of other ways that we can check for learning. The first is using a retention test. So retention implies persistence, right? So means that if I don't practice for a while and then I do the skill again, I'm still going to be able to do it pretty well. So a good example of this is riding a bike, right? A lot of us learn to ride a bike when we're small. And then we go through a period of time that could be years and years and years before we ever get on a bike again. But when we get back on a bike 20 years later, guess what? I can still ride a bike. I'm a little bit wobbly for the first half hour, but I can still ride a bike. Because I learned to ride the bike really well when I was young. Not that I could ride really well, but I learned it well, right? The other choice we have is using a transfer test, and we do this a lot in sport. Right? We practice a skill in one context and then we use it and compete it in a different context, in a different situation. Right? So transfer tests are very important in sport. Okay? Oftentimes it's said that transfer tests are very important for open skills, and they certainly are. Right? I can practice, you watch them all the time, the kids on the basketball court, practicing dribbling and shooting, right? But it's totally different when I have to do that and there's a whole team of people trying to stop me shooting the ball. That's a transfer test, right? I have to disagree a little bit because I think they're really important in certain close skills as well. Having been a gymnast and a coach, right? I can have my gymnast practice a skill over and over again in the gym and it looks really good, and then when we put it into the competition, she lands on her face. But she didn't do that in practice, right? But when I changed the context, the skill wasn't learned well enough. It looked like it was learned, but when I stress the skill, it falls apart, right? That's a transfer test. So what we're trying to identify is a learning effect versus a performance effect or practice effect, right? Learning effects are going to be permanent, mostly, right? Performance effects are temporary. So a very good example of this is personal bests, right? So a personal best for a race of some kind. Doesn't matter whether you're looking at swimming or running or cycling. Personal bests are rarely performed in training. Personal bests are nearly always done at a competition. Why? Because you take all that training and you add in adrenaline, crowd support, motivation to do well for your team. You add in all these other variables, and by golly, I'm going as fast as I can, and I got a personal best. When I go back to training next week, can I do it again? Hell no. Right? That's why it's a personal best. It's there as a goal, but I can't do it now back in training. Right? That's a performance effect, not a learning effect. Okay? And as I've said, we can use transfer tests or retention tests to try to define whether the performance is permanent or temporary. Right? The weekend can act as a retention test. Right? So I'm doing a new skill or a new strategy with my athlete or my team, and we've been working on it during the week, and it's getting better, and then we don't see each other for Saturday and Sunday, and we come back Monday. What happens on Monday? Right? If that thing we were working on last week that was getting better and better is completely ghastly on Monday, then the getting better during the week was a practice effect, not a learning effect, right? If on Monday my athlete or my team can still do that thing we were practicing last week really well, then a lot of learning went on last week. Okay? How much more do I have here? All right, I'm going to stop there because the information on the final chapter is probably about 45 minutes, so I could finish this, because that's a lot of information I've thrown at you today. So let's hold off on stages of learning until Tuesday, and then we will finish the stages of learning, and we will do chapter 18 on Tuesday. And then Thursday will be your review class, and then it's finals week before we blink. All right? Questions?
Yes. No, I'm
No.
good.
Anybody else?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, this next little bit is one of the things that is in the chapter, but I wanted to talk a bit more about it, because I think it's a really important teaching tool. And then we will look at chapter 18, which tries to wrap everything up for us. Okay? And it also gives us a new assessment tool, and that's the final assignment. So, do that Tuesday.
Sounds good.
Okie dokie. All right. Have a great day. And I will, what's tomorrow? Friday. I will dial in at 12 if anybody has any questions on playground analysis or anything like that. I will be in the Collaborate room at 12. But if you don't have questions, then just use that time to keep working on your analyses, okay?
Yes, ma'am.